This is something intended especially for the runners amongst you, though it's absolutely not exclusively for runners. I hope that if you are a runner, you will find some of this helpful, perhaps as a pre-run warm-up and stimulation of joints and muscles. I also like to mention, before I get into the movement aspect of things, we posted something on our Facebook page the other day about the benefits of breathing through your nose if you're a runner. So I encourage you to have a look for that and experiment with that, especially given the thought that perhaps the current time is not the best time to be aiming for your personal best or breaking any records, but rather a time to be becoming more aware of what's happening in your body when you're running. How does running really feel? How do your joints feel? And so on and so forth. So maybe taking a bit more time, maybe going a little bit slower, and recognizing your technique, things like that. So enough of the soapbox lecture. We're going to start out with specific attention to toes and ankles, which maybe get overlooked. So I'm going to tuck my toes forwards, and that may mean a little bit of assistance to get my little toe forwards, and then to sit into my heels. Now, this is going to put some load onto your knees as well, depending upon how flexible you are. Pardon the background noise. And may feel some pressure in your knees. You can always, cushion things as feels appropriate for you. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here, and then kneel up and point my toes back, and then I'm resisting my ankles folding out to the side as I try and sit back towards my heel. So now the emphasis is really on opening up the front of my ankles, so working on flexibility sort of the other way, the kind of counter calf stretch, if you will. So a few moments there, seeing how things feel, rising back up, pulling your toes forward, so there's an active component to that. But again, you can always give a little bit of assistance, especially to toes that you haven't managed to get underneath. And again, sitting back into that position. I quite like kind of the extra press of my hands back into my heels, so I can maybe increase the amount of pressure on my toes. This is totally optional, depending upon how used you are to getting your toes to sort of a 90-degree angle to your foot. And again, rising up, toes pointing back, resisting the fold of your ankles out to the side, and then sitting back. If this is really intense, of course, you can try keeping your hands on the ground and just sitting back with a little bit more caution, taking some of the weight through your hands. Or if your tissues and joints will permit it, you can just sit all the way back. Okay, so rising back up, and then we're going to go into this low lunge. I'm going to keep my back toes tucked forward, and then first of all I'm going to drive this hip forwards and then lean back, and I'm going to try and touch my back heel with my fingers and then return to where I started. So the initiation is hip pushing forwards, which is actually done by my buttock muscles. I'm leaning back and turning to touch my heel, and then easing off. And we'll do that 3 more times. If you can't touch your heel, don't be concerned. Maybe you can touch your calf, or maybe you can just reach for your heel, and you'll find in a relatively short time that you gain the flexibility to reach it. And then switching sides. Just as a interesting bit of practice, try changing sides without bringing your hands down onto the ground. So now I'm pushing the other hip forwards, the one which is now hidden by my right leg. So my back toes are tucked forwards, pushing that hip forwards. So I'm not leaning, this knee doesn't really need to move. I'm actively using my bottom to drive my hip forwards and then turning to catch my heel wherever it is and then easing off. So what I'd expect you to feel is quite a big stretch through the front of your hip and perhaps down your thigh towards your knee of that leg where the knee's on the floor. Losing count already. So I'll do one more on this side. Apologies if that's 6 rather than 5. Okay, and then coming to all fours. Now, this is a rather more complex movement, and I particularly like it because it involves quite a lot of movement of your spine, and it's easy to forget that running is really a whole body action, and we want the integration and kind of cross patterning of arms and legs to make our running more efficient. So, pressing my hands into the ground, toes tucked forwards, I'm going to hover my knees off the ground, and then as one foot turns, the other foot reaches underneath. Both feet are now on the ground, and I'm going to look down towards my supporting hand as I try and push my hips up away from the ground. I like holding onto my rib cage. You could reach your hand up, doesn't really matter what you do with that hand. And then the return is exactly the reverse. So there has to be this pivot around my back foot to allow me to get to that position. So the same thing to the other side. Knees hovering, one foot reaches underneath, both feet stand on the ground, pushing my hips up as I look down towards my supporting hand, and then I'm trying to control the return back to here. So there's a lot of movement in my hip joints, and there's a lot of movement at my shoulder joint, working kind of in concert with each other. And again, this is really important in terms of efficient running. Once more, you want that integration of arms and legs for your efficiency. So once more each way, knees hover, foot reaches underneath, both feet press into the floor, hips drive up towards the ceiling or the sky if you're lucky like me being out in the garden, looking down towards that hand, and then turning back straight to the other side and turning back. So I'm just going to go do 2 for now. I'd encourage you to maybe do 3 or 4 or 5 each way, and hopefully you'll get a really satisfactory twist through your upper back. And of course, coming from a Pilates perspective, the more supple your spine is, the better. If your running involves your spine staying quite stiff, then that's going to make for a less efficient form. Now, from this all fours position, I'm going to step one foot forwards. So it's next to my hand. It could be inside or outside, it doesn't really matter. Now, I have the flexibility that I can move my knee back a little bit more. So you can tinker with that. You want to be in a position where it feels like it's sort of a challenge to be there. If my knee is here, this is a little bit easy. So I'm going to reach that knee back, and then pushing through my heel, my knee lifts off the ground. Now I'm aiming for one diagonal line from my heel to the top of my head. And I'm trying to really reach my heel back and lock my knee out. And then, to get into the juicy bit, I'm going to let my knee bend so that my hips actually lower toward the floor. And I'm actually trying to press my hips down without my knee touching. So I have a new position for my hips, and I'm then going to try to reach through my heel and re-straighten my knee. Ideally this shin would be vertical. In re-straightening my knee, I've really increased the amount of stretch through the front of my hip, hence the wincing. A few moments there, and then I'm going to allow my knee to bend, pressing my hips a little bit lower to the ground. And again, I'm going to try to maintain this new position of my hips as I re-straighten my knee. Now this is becoming really hard work and a very big pull through the front of my hip and kind of almost up into my abdomen. And then I'm going to ease off once again. And because it feels so good, I'm going to try it one more time. Driving that heel back, trying to get my knee locked out, and then releasing that knee down. Now, before we switched to side 2, I'm going to come back to a more sort of right angle kneeling position. And from here, hopefully I can keep my balance. I'm going to pull my heel up towards my bottom using my hands to assist. So actually I'm going to use the hand on that side and use this hand to help me balance. Now, once again, I'm moving into a position which is quite a stretch for me. And I'm going to try to switch the work of keeping my heel there from my hand, which is doing it at the moment, to the back of my leg. It's going to be specifically my hamstring. So I'm starting to pull my heel strongly towards my buttock, increasing that effort. So now I'm sort of maximum pulling in of my heel, and I'm going to see if I can let go with my hand and not let my heel drop, and then I'm going to release my heel down because my hamstring feels that very strongly. So I'm going to try that once again. Pulling my heel up, whoops, to see how much I can do actively, and then my hand's going to assist. I'm aiming to hold the front of my ankle rather than my foot if that's possible, so really the bottom of my shin. So my arm is doing all the work now. Then I'm going to switch to trying to pull my heel in towards my buttock. I want to maintain an upright position as I do that, so I'm not leaking the movement out from anywhere else in my body. And when I feel like I've got maximum pull of my heel in towards my bottom, I'm going to release my hand and then release that foot down. And I'm going to then just stand up and have a little bit of a shake out for a moment. And then we'll do side 2. So back to this kind of long diagonal stretch. So this shin is near enough vertical, and my knee and foot are reaching back enough that I can feel there's a little bit of a stretch going on already. And then my heel reaches back to pull my knee off the floor. I'm not rounding my back and tucking my head in, I'm trying to keep this idea of being very long. So a few moments there, and then I allow my knee to bend so that my pelvis can go lower to the ground. I'm going to endeavour to keep my pelvis there as I re-straighten my back knee. Again, big pull through the front of my hip. Hopefully that knee is now straight. A few moments there. Ideally my breathing stays calm. Another knee bend to drop my hips a bit lower. And then re-straightening my knee, leaving my hips at the same height if I can. So in this position where I've got this extra stretch, this is the most stretch I've had so far, while I hold that, I'm again trying to keep my breathing calm. If I start to sort of hyperventilate, then it's a way of telling my body that this is not a good idea, and actually I want to reinforce the idea that it is a good idea for me to be in this position. Once more, maybe one less than the other side, but there we are. So hip lowers down as my knee bends. I'm trying to keep my hips as close to the ground as they were as I stretch my heel back and extend my knee. And then releasing all the way down to come up to that, again, more sort of right angle kneeling position. So my stance is wide enough that I'm not going to topple over, I hope, as I pull my heel up, and then I'm going to let my hand assist. Again, I'm aiming to hold my ankle rather than my foot. If I'm holding my foot, then I'm possibly just stretching the ligaments in the front of my ankle rather than actually having more effect on my thigh and more work for my hamstring. So heel to buttock, staying as upright as possible, and I'm going to try and transfer the work to my leg, pulling my heel in. So I'm close to maximum heel towards buttock effort, so I'm going to release my hand and try and hold it there, and then release that foot down. A little bit of a breather. And then once again. It's a bit tough on the decking, even with the mat there. So you may want to have something fairly soft underneath your knee. So I'm putting my heel up as much as I can, then letting my hand catch my leg and do the last little bit of work. And then I'm trying to take over by using the back of my thigh to pull my heel in. So whatever muscles you can find in your leg to pull your heel towards your buttock, use them, dial that up to the maximum, and then release your hand, and then release that leg down. And again, I'm going to stand, let's have a little bit of a shake out for a moment. Now, I didn't suggest this as a pre-test, but maybe it's a good post-test of what you've been doing, just to try doing a few squats to see how smooth and easy that might feel. On the whole, or people that I trust and respect regard one's capacity to squat to be a very good measure of how likely one's running efficiency is to be. I don't know if that sentence made sense. Squatting's good. So I hope that little sequence is useful. You could just take pieces of that. You could just do one thing at a time. There's no need to do the whole thing. As always, I'd be very interested to hear how that's useful or not. Thanks for watching.